there guys, it's Salis, and today I have the pleasure of announcing to the YouTuberverse, Schrödinger's cat and the Raiders of the Lost Quark. I'm bad at this. I really wanted to go into this and give it a glowing review, because when I saw this at EGX I thought it was the best thing since sliced toast. But there's just too many bugs in a full release to justify that, plus there's a list of other issues that just can't be ignored. So in advance, I want to say I'm sorry. Schrödinger's cat follows in the footsteps of its traditional platformer brothers and sisters, in that it uses a bright and vibrant colour scheme throughout, with all sorts of various game elements having crazy bright colours, from the red, blue, green and yellow, although at times it can be hard to spot the difference between the last two, Quarks, the particle zoo itself and its respective employees. But where it differs from other platformers, in a major, even deal-breaking way for some, it seems to have absolutely no concept of scale. The player character is huge in comparison to some enemies, and even objects, and I understand this was put in to give an idea of how big the relative subatomic particles are in relation to each other. But this makes some enemies almost unnoticeable. And before you ask, I was playing this in 1080p because that's my native resolution. And before you start yelling at me to lower the resolution in order to increase size, I would like to say it doesn't help. Either that or they are really, really small and look even smaller on a big monitor. Another complaint I have about the game is the level design seems very Spartan, and on more than one occasion I noticed repeated and palette-swapped elements from previous areas, reused and rehashed, which made navigation somewhat difficult, since a lot of the game is bouncing from one hovering platform in the void of time and space to the next. But those things aside, the design in this game is fun, quirky and exciting, as well as very clever. The main character, the cat, being a standout. Okay, before I continue on this point, a quick lesson on quantum mechanics and the uncertainty principle. Don't laugh, this is a real thing. In 1935, Erwin Schrödinger, a physicist, yes, that one in the corner, performed an experiment wherein a cat was placed within a box with a vial of poison which would break open at a set time. Once the box was sealed shut with the cat securely within, the cat could be considered both alive and dead at the same time, because you can't prove either way. It's only once the box is opened that you even can. Now, I know you're asking why that lesson applies to the design of a video game. Simple. This is a very smart game, with references to subatomic particles, various physics principles, and indeed quantum mechanics. The first you might notice, in that regard, is the design of the cat. He's pink on one side and purple on the other. A perfect 50-50 divide. So you could say one side represents an alive cat and the other a dead cat. This has to be one of the smartest design aspects I've seen in any game ever. This game also absolutely excels in its sound design. The first thing you hear is this funky techno-esque music with a really catchy beat, and it really drew me in. And as I adjusted the various sound levels, the sound effects that played were funny enough to spur me on. And once I actually entered the game, it only got better from there. The game is fully voice acted, and oh my god is it funny. It's deliberately over the top, corny and cartoonish, which I think fits perfectly with the aesthetic. You get a real idea of the Saturday morning cartoon vibe they're going for. Granted, it relies heavily on stereotypes, such as the first NPC you meet in the game, who is guarding the zoo and is clearly Canadian from the thick accent and the fact that he ends every sentence with a noticeable and indeed subtitled E, or the characters who sound like the kind of people you would meet in the deep south. Helped, of course, because the big one only has 2 teeth. But I think the best sounds in the game go to the Quarks. Each has their own voices and phrases, which, even though you hear them over and over, they're subtle enough not to be annoying. But if I had to pick one problem with the sound, it would be the fact that the cat does the Deadpool thing. And he likes to punctuate his every action with funny little quips. But the problem is he's very loud and only has a limited number of quips. And it's not long before he starts to have the effect of an industrial sander on your inner ear. But that withstanding, the game has had some amazing work put into its sound. Once again, no spoiler alert this time, because I haven't finished the game, and I probably won't be able to. So, I can't possibly spoil the ending for any of you. However, I can spoil the parts I've seen so far, so consider this a warning. So without further ado, here goes. One day, some kind of catastrophe strikes the particle zoo, which is a zoo for subatomic particles within a single atom, but don't get confused. Anyway, The talking particles inside the central control room, aka the nucleus, I see what you did there, they can't fix squat. But they do know of one who can, the cat of the famous physicist Erwin Schrödinger, who presumably only learned how to fix atoms from watching Daddy. So, they call him in to fix the problem, and it's a good job this happened before the whole box unpleasantness took place. He arrives at the particle zoo to find it under complete lockdown, with the exception of a single maintenance hatch in the back, which I think is just bad design. So he learns how to use the various quarks who litter the place after the calamity scattered them from the quark pond, and he has to use the various abilities of the quarks to overcome obstacles and return the escape particles to their pens, and basically clean up the mess that the staff are too incompetent to fix. And now comes my speculation regarding the plot. During the game you're introduced to the idea of a strange quark, actual name, and if the strange quark should ever get out of its containment inside the nucleus, which again is bad design, why would you contain something within the central control room, it would destroy the world in a puddle of goo. Now, going on that, I'm willing to bet it gets free and begins converting the world. You have to find some opposite of the strange quark in order to perform some complicated physics thing to get the world straightened out, but as I said, this is pure speculation. Now, I don't normally do a bug section, but in this case, I think we need one. So, before we even get into it, allow me to tell you of my woes just trying to start the game. The first few times I tried starting the game, I was greeted with an infinite loading screen, just an image of a cat running constantly. And after a reinstall and trawling the Steam forums, I found this is a common bug. In order to overcome it, I had to go into the options and delete my save data, which probably wouldn't occur to most people, because why would you delete save data you don't have? But turns out what it does is it forces the game to create a new save slot. So yeah, it does have bugs. Like when it quietly froze after I chose what seemed to be the wrong option during a dialogue section. And then there's the constant graphics glitches and interaction bugs, like the many times the enemy who was chasing me got stuck in a wall and was never to bother me again. Don't get me wrong, it made the game very easy to breathe through and write this review. And this is a big game breaker for me, there's at least a part of the game where you have to throw a bomb into a V-shaped hole in order to blow up an entire platform. It doesn't. It blows up about 4/5 of the platform, maximum. And it leaves a tiny speck of a platform upon which still stands the thing I need to drop down. And I need to drop down in order to continue the game. For a game based around the concepts of physics, it could really do with some physics in it. And that would probably stop me getting stuck in the terrain all the damn time too. I bet they only added the instant restart button to get around the fact that this game has so many issues. This game has all the hallmarks of a game that ran out of something, be it money, time, or any combination thereof. But on the gameplay front, Schrödinger's cat follows a standard platformer model, running, jumping, and precision aiming, that made the platformer genre so dominant in the past. But the major change made to this is the introduction of the quarks. With only 4 types of quarks, they've managed to make them perform a myriad of tasks, so I suppose this game should be classified as an action puzzle platformer, and that's a lot of plates to keep spinning at once. But it does manage to do so fairly well. Allow me to clarify, I said fairly well. Because when you try to keep as many balls in the air at once, you're bound to drop one occasionally. And in the case of Schrödinger's cat, I would have to say the platforming suffers the most, with the puzzles coming in a close second. And now to explain. Platformer veterans will have to fight their most basic instincts here, because we grew up on very fast platformers, but Schrödinger's cat actively discourages this, because there are areas of the zoo where availability of the quarks to complete the puzzles is extremely limited, and you can miss or lose various assets with no way to get them back without losing more in return. So speed is very much discouraged, none more so than in a supposed boss fight which is basically running away, where in order not to miss certain platforms you have to actually stop dead in your tracks. And the puzzles, while they do have multiple ways to approach them, with the various quark combinations, it is very easy for you to find the one combination which utterly breaks the puzzle and thus making it irrelevant. Controls for this game I found a little odd. At first, there's a message at the start. It says, "Toss your mouse aside, this is a cat's game." So the whole game is controlled by the keyboard. But what struck me as odd was a platformer with no gamepad support. I don't know about you, but when I play a platformer, I preferred to do it with a nice comfy controller rather than a keyboard. Although it was a novelty, I haven't needed both hands on my keyboard for a game in a very long time. And I just honestly hope they didn't ignore controllers just to get in that bad pun. But minor complaints aside, the keyboard controls are tight. Admittedly, it's trickier to adjust your jump in mid-air using digital controls, but mapping the Quark controls to the arrow keys does allow you to select your combo very quickly. And this does help to combat the speed reduction, but it does also allow the opportunity to screw up your combos by hitting the wrong keys. So I don't know about your hardware, but the arrows on my Strike 5 keyboard are very close together and I often hit the wrong buttons. Now, for some, they would argue a platformer would not have much replay value, but in the case of Schrödinger's cat, I would have to argue going back for the humour alone is replay value in itself, but if you require something new, you can always try using different combos to complete the puzzles, or, and again I'm speculating here, aside from the parts of the game where clearing out the rogue particles you are required to capture for story progression, to progress to the next area most of the time you don't always need to clear the rogues out. So if you don't do it the first time, you can go back and play the game including all the clean-up bits. So I can see this game having some replay value assuming they fix the bugs. So in conclusion, Schrödinger's cat and the Raiders of the Lost Quark is a fun and funny platformer with some interesting gameplay mechanics and a very clever theme. The idea of basing an entire game around theoretical physics is a difficult task in itself, and making it fun is even harder. These are some complex concepts we're dealing with here, and it's fun to play, and you never know, you might just learn something. But still those bugs! They just can't be ignored. So sadly, I'm forced by circumstance to state that Schrödinger's cat is average. If you want a funny, interesting platformer, but don't mind doing a bit of workaround to get past its issues, it's okay. But if you came here expecting a lump of perfect southern fried gold, then I'd recommend looking elsewhere. And with that in mind, I'm going to give Schrödinger's cat and the Raiders of the Lost Quark 5 out of 10. So, thank you for watching my review of Schrödinger's cat and the Raiders of the Lost Quark and its Bugapalooza. And as always, I've been Salis, I've been bad at Schrödinger's cat, and I will see you next time.